It's Gabriel.
It's Bailey.
And this is CYMK.
Okay, so who are we here with today?
Debbie Carroll from Christoval.
Nice to meet you. I've met you before, but nice to meet you again. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, sure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So like you were talking about earlier, you're speaking here at the EPAT event. For those who may not know, do you want to talk about what Plein Air is?
Yes. Plein Air is an event that we have in San Angelo. Well, actually, there's many events all over the country, but the event that we have in San Angelo is on Plein Air, Texas, and it's a painting competition where the artists come from all over the country, paint outdoors for about a week, and then we take all of our paintings and show them in the Stampede, which is what they call the event where they show all the artwork that the artists have done during the week, and people have the opportunity to buy those pieces and see what the artist did. And it's really an interesting event because you do get that sampling of artists all over the country, and many of them do multiple events where they're going somewhere some of them almost every week to do this.
Do they leave their paintings they make here and then go travel somewhere else? And then, so their paintings here, but they're not?
Well, after the event is over, whatever doesn't sell, I know sometimes the museum takes some of those and they'll do an exhibition after the fact.
We had one of those recently.
Yes, very recently. And then, generally they do take their paintings with them and, probably put them on their website or maybe they're in a gallery and put them on exhibition there.
When it comes to Plein Air, is that primarily and strictly painting outdoors?
Painting on Plein Air is mostly painting outdoors, but you do have those exceptions where at an event where maybe the weather's really bad or maybe they just include it where they can paint indoors, but it's always painting from life. So I would say it's known for being painted outdoors, but that isn't, a hard and fast rule.
Okay, nice. So I also read that you had moved from a bigger city. In which city? And then you said you moved to Christoval here, so that was kind of a jump. So were you painting more of the cityscape there and then switched to the rural?
No, I feel like I've never really been what you would call kind of an urban painter. We lived in Austin. I've lived in Texas for many years. I've lived in Dallas twice and Houston twice and then in Austin for 25 years. And I've always wanted to live in a small town. Mm-hmm. And Christoval definitely classifies as a small town. I think it's less than 500 people.
Oh my goodness. But is there a school or do you come into town for groceries and stuff? Like how small are we talking?
Well, we do have the schools. We live 2 doors away from the elementary school and then just up the road from junior high and high schools all together. But yes, we do come into town for groceries, although I did hear that we're getting a dollar store, or a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree, one of those.
Dollar Generals are really, it's like a neighborhood Walmart, but of
every little town seems to have one. Yeah. That and a donut shop.
When I go through Eden, it's just boutiques and then Dollar Generals and then a donut shop. Yeah. A gas station.
And a gas station.
The essentials.
Yeah. So no, we really wanted to make that jump. And I do like to paint landscapes primarily. I'm kind of interested in adding some figures into the landscapes and some animals. And that's something I'm slowly kind of working on. But, we would go to New Mexico a lot from Austin. And that was another reason we liked moving further west because we're that much closer. And we just like the open skies and the terrain here. It's just, the sky is everything, in West Texas. So, I like painting the landscape. And that was another one of the reasons we wanted to move away from the city is to have more of those opportunities. And I had started painting plein air before we moved here. I would go with a friend of mine, Barbara Clark, she's painted plein air for years. And we'd go with her, did some painting trips. That's always high on my list to go on these painting trips, usually with another artist friend who likes to do the same thing. And then, you could go out together. It's a little bit of safety in numbers. Just, some weird things can happen when you're out and about and out in the just out in the middle of nowhere painting.
Right. Do you stick to painting in daytime or is nighttime always a good?
Usually with the plein air events, they like to have a nocturne, what they call a nocturne, so a night painting. And those are really kind of fun. They're challenging because, you need to be set up where you can see at night. And I already have an idea in mind of what I want to paint when I do on Plein Air, Texas this year, what I want to paint at nighttime. I have a...
Is it a secret, or can you give us a little idea? Or no, I don't want anyone to steal your idea.
No, I'm going to keep it a secret because I think it would be fun. I saw something somebody posted on, I think it was Facebook, and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm going to paint for my nocturne.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Well, and I think being the local artist in this event, because I live here and I drive around and I see different things, I do already have some ideas in mind of things I would like to attempt to paint on plein air and outdoors. And I may even go and do a little practice run just because I can. And, it can be a little intimidating being in an event like that with people that the group that's coming, they are award-winning artists at all of these events and have been doing this for many years. So it's a little intimidating, but it's also really a good learning curve for me because I get to be with these artists, and I think they're very giving and inclusive.
And they all, from what I saw last year, they all have such different styles.
Yes.
And so learning from different techniques, and I saw watercolor. So first off, I always thought that it was mostly just oils that people used. But so what do you use in your paintings?
I use acrylic, which is really challenging because it dries fast. It's, it's the pro and con thing. It's a pro because, yes, it dries fast, but then it's a con because it dries fast. So you have to work quickly. I have had some instances. I think that first year when I did EPAT in 2020, a man came and he was talking to me. And you do want people to be interested in what you're doing. But when you're painting acrylic, it was like, okay,
and
I have to.
The wind is hitting you. And you're just it's drying.
I said, okay, my painting's drying really quick. I really need to get this finished, And there's some tips and tricks. Like there was other acrylic painters that have been here, and I always ask them, what do you do to, keep your paints wet? And everybody has a different approach. Some of them use the open paints that dry slower or use what they call a retarder that slows down the drying process. It kind of alters the texture of the paint. So I'm not always, I really like using my certain types of paint that are heavy body. So, that's a little bit of a challenge, but it's helpful to see what other people do.
Do artists incorporate the paint's texture itself into texture in the art, in the landscape?
I think mostly oil painters do that. I mean,
because
that's a benefit of oils that you can almost sculpt with the paint. I did do a session, 3 days with a painter in Santa Fe that my husband does framing for. And she's like, oh, I want to show you how I do my oil painting. And she talked about that, about how you can sculpt with the paint and use the direction of the brush strokes to work in your favor when you're doing your composition and everything. And I did find it very interesting and was pretty happy with the piece that I did with her. But generally, I'm trying to do, I have a show in September, and I feel like I'm always a little behind, and I'm trying to do my painting. Are you still
pushing out paintings for it?
Oh, yeah, I'm not quite done. I'm going to an event on Saturday that's an anniversary party for that gallery, and Suzanne Horner and I are going to paint live.
Oh,
and so
and that's going to probably be in town, or that will be in town?
It'll be in Buda, Texas, just outside of Austin. So it kind of served the Austin area, and then probably a little bit of San Antonio, San Marcos, Lockhart. But we're going to paint live for that. So I think I may try to do the last piece for the show at that event.
That would be awesome.
Well, and then I can talk about how, that'll be part of the show coming up in September and everything.
This is back to people stopping you whenever you're working. Whenever we had the event here, it was down by our on Concho.
Yes.
And there were just a bunch of people, artists propped up with their easels. And I was in the car with a family friend, and they were like, what's happening? And I was like, I know the answer to this, actually. It's an EnPleinAir event. And so I felt very studious in knowing that. But it's like, they look so tiny when you're driving so fast. You guys are just like right there making beautiful art. And you come back an hour later and you're
Did
still
you see
making beautiful art.
The video they did of that with the drone?
No, I bet it looked crazy.
I think they're going to run it at the visitor center. And it really was great because it gave you such a nice overview of St. Angelo and, all of the high points and landmarks that that we all love. And then it showed the artist working. And I love that we set up on Concho. I wasn't in it last year. I was one of the ambassadors, and I was there on site, just kind of helping the artists and directing people. But it really, and the artists are they're very gracious and very happy to share what they're doing. Like Matt Barber Kennedy, for instance. I love what he does. It's totally different from what I do. He works in watercolor. And it was just so interesting to see how he builds his pieces layer upon layer. And he has a distinct style. I mean, like you were talking about, everybody has a different style. And then Christine Lashley, of course, she's always amazing to me because her pieces look very finished for a plein air piece. I mean, that's a challenge to go out.
I was going to ask about
do
that.
a piece in, a short period of time. And when you're doing the event, I remember in 2020, there was a day I went out and I did 3 pieces in a day. And it's a little...
Were they all different landscapes or different locations?
The first one was on the side of the highway on the way from Cristobal to San Angelo. And I was painting a painting of a hayfield, which I think they have since replanted with something else. So
were you right by the passing cars that were going zoom, zoom?
I was. There was a little pull-off.
Help or?
Little pull-off. In fact, I was so intent on what I was doing. Treva came up to see if I wanted a snack and walked all the way up to me, tapped me on the shoulder. I never heard her, and I must have jumped 20 feet in the air.
Oh, my goodness. I'd be scared.
She was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't think I was going to scare you," but I really didn't know she was there because, I was trying to tune out all those cars whizzing by and focus on what I was doing.
Turn in a white noise. And
And then that same day, I also went to the water lily gardens and painted there. In fact, that's where I had one of my people come up, and I had to tell him at some point that I need to finish this. And then
is this during the school year or is it during summertime?
It's during the school year. It's last week of October.
Are there any kids that come and kind of bother you? I know it's a hot spot.
Well,
for
no,
high
they
school.
do like a big, at the Water Lily Gardens, as a matter of fact, they do an event where they bring busloads of school kids. And I think it was not just San Angelo. I think it might have been Wall, and I'm not sure where else, to come and see the artist painting. And then they also do a thing where they send the artists out to several of the schools to talk to the kids about painting plein air and what it's like to be a painter as a profession.
That's awesome.
And I know that the artists really enjoy that. And I plan on doing it this year. I think it'll be fun.
What would you tell kids about being a professional artist and how to get into art?
Well, I would tell them that I would encourage them to go to school.
Right.
Of course, because I think the more you can know, because really being an artist is like being an entrepreneur or a small business owner, if you're going to do it for a living. And so you do need to know like how to market yourself and do your books. And I mean, you can hire some of that out, but if you're going to do it and do it all, which unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know how you want to look at it, I do all my stuff. I don't farm anything out. I do it all. And I get that question a lot. Well, what if you had an assistant? But sometimes the process of doing it, I mean, it's just good because, you have certain insights because you're doing it that you might bring to those other elements of the business. But no, I would tell kids if they wanted to do that, to go to school. And there's a lot of different avenues that you can do as an artist. You could be an illustrator. You could go into, interior design is not really being an artist, but it is in a sense.
Because you have to have that concept,
yes,
the way to make up the visual.
Yes, it's more of a 3D, but there's a lot of the graphic design. I went to school for graphic design for a while too, so I've got a lot of different things. And you use all those things that you learn, and the graphic designs come in handy because I feel like that helps me with websites and doing postcards or any kind of.
Did you build your own website and then?
No, I don't know how to build websites. So I do mine through the FASO, the Fine Art Studios online. And it's a really good website company because, you can tie in your emails with it. But I mean, you still have to do certain elements to make that all happen. And I think in logos and that kind of thing, that all comes in handy, trust me. But I mean, if a child was going to go to school and go to school for art, I would encourage them to take marketing classes and maybe even some legal classes because, there are copyright issues and when you sign on with galleries and that type of thing, you're usually signing a contract. So there's a lot of things that you could add to the mix to, help yourself if you were going to be an artist as your profession.
Whenever you had some pieces in here for that exhibit we recently just had from EPAT last year, were those pieces from last year, EPAT?
I'm trying to remember what I gave you guys.
There were so many pieces.
I think...
I know there was a church. And it was...
Oh, that was a studio piece. It was a bigger piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bigger pieces were studio pieces. And I think the small pieces were Plein Air.
So did you sign a contract to have those in?
Well, you sign a waiver just, saying that, that it's a consignment agreement.
Right. So back to marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, what is marketing? Because I haven't taken business. So
it's promotion, basically.
Yourself on like Facebook and Instagram?
Yes. Well, I think, in this day and age, the artists have a real advantage because, back in the day, you didn't have those ways of promoting your work. You could be in a gallery, and that was a way of promoting your work, but through a secondary person that is going to take 50%, or sometimes it's less than that, of your sales. However, I will say this in favor of galleries because I'm in several galleries and you can't be everywhere. And it's really helpful to have an objective person selling your work because, it's sometimes I feel like as an artist, it's maybe hard to sell your own work and be objective about it. And it's nice to have somebody that's in your corner and promoting your work for you. And, a lot of people choose to go the art fair route, especially before social media, because that was a way of doing it, promoting it yourself. But I've done them, and they're a lot of work. There's circumstances beyond your control that can affect the outcome of a show. That you might come with the best work you've ever made, and your setup looks beautiful, but if people don't come to the show, like the weather's bad or it's not advertised properly, you could come away with selling nothing, and which can be very daunting and discouraging for an artist. And I try to tell people that, because I will have other artists reach out to me, especially artists that are starting out and ask me questions like, well, how did you get started? What did you do? And I did the art fairs, and I still do a couple here and there, but I've gotten to where I really only like inside shows because the weather is... the wind.
In the summer heat. Because they always want to have art shows when it's really nice outside and really hot.
Oh, one of the last ones I did, it was a few years ago. It was in Midland. And my tent, the way it was set up, caught the heat from like noon on. And
it just kind of baked you in
Oh,
there?
it baked me.
Oh, gosh.
And, and it bakes, it gets so hot, the people don't really want to be walking around either. And they certainly don't want to stand around in your tent when it's like an oven. So, as far as promoting, I think social media has been really a boon to artists these days because, it's free. All it really takes is your time and effort. And, if people are going to do that, I really encourage them to be authentic about their posts and be real. Don't be afraid to share. I try not to really share anything bad. I don't want to sound like I'm whining or complaining. I like to keep it upbeat. And, because not every day is great. You're not selling stuff every day, but there's plenty of good things to focus on. Right. And I like to show works in progress and kind of show the process because I think people find that very interesting. Like, how do you come from this point A idea to a finished piece?
Yeah.
And I like to look at when other artists post those. I always look at those because I find them interesting.
Could you talk about your process from beginning to finish and how you start a piece?
Sure. Okay. So, I do plein air. So obviously I have sketches and plein air pieces I can work from, but I do take a ton of reference photos because I don't always have the luxury of the time to do that. Like if I'm on vacation, especially like with my husband, it's not really fair to say, hey, I'm going to sit here and paint for an hour. twiddling his thumbs. So I take a lot of reference photos, and then my photos really, I don't paint super realistically, they're representational, but I really like to use them as a jumping off point. I don't want to be a slave to the photo. I try to take the elements in the photo that attracted me to the scene in the first place, which is usually the light or some shapes, or how the shapes relate within a certain landscape. But I take that and then I do a sketch. And then that's sort of my point where I'm kind of editing and deciding, like, what is my composition going to be? And really in the photographic process, I do try to do my composition within that. I feel like composition is probably, out of all of my skill sets, probably my stronger skill set compared to some of the others. So I really try to make sure my composition is what I want and make it, interesting and inviting and something that I can build upon. And then I'll tone the canvas, and then I sketch in. And sometimes I sketch in just with paint. Sometimes I draw it in with charcoal or a pencil, and then I go over it with paint and kind of establish those and use a little bit of a darker line, because I used to paint primarily just almost all the time on a black canvas, and then sketch in with a light color on that, and then paint in the negative space.
Oh, okay. So the black canvas is the negative space?
Well, the black canvas was the backdrop, but when I would paint in with the negative space, I could leave like an outline.
Oh, okay.
When I was doing the piece. So if I'm not doing that, if I'm painting on a color, which I've been doing a lot more lately, I will use the dark outline of my initial sketch as a way to establish a little bit of an outline if I want to go back and leave that. And then I try to break up the outline when I'm painting so that, it's not real even, I want to make the line interesting and varied. And
in your work, I've noticed a lot of very soft edges, and it's just that's what I think is very most like comforting and like approachable about it, is that it's not really jagged. And
that's kind of what I am trying to do. I don't want it to be, it is graphic in nature as far as the style with the line work, but I don't want it to be just outlined. I want it to be, I want to make it interesting.
Right.
And then,
it has a very organic flow to it whenever I see your work.
Well,
so I like it.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I work hard to try to make it inviting. And I mean, that was a phrase that I used in one of my statements early on, that I felt like, a piece of art should be like a good book where it invites you to come in and be part of it. And that is kind of what I'm attempting in my pieces, that I want people to, kind of stop and really look at it. And I'll work on a piece and I'll bring it in the house. So I do have my own studio, and I'll bring it in the house. The light's not always the best, so I like to bring it in and really examine it when I'm having my morning coffee, and the lights on it, and just kind of if it's something that I keep looking at and wanting to look at, then I know that I'm headed in the right direction. That I would hope that other people would feel the same way.
That is good advice. Yeah, if you like it, other people are going to like it.
Although it's funny, sometimes you have a piece that you really love, and it's, and you have it for a while. I had a piece that I really felt like it was one of my best pieces, and I would go to a show and my artist friends would say, I can't believe you still have that piece. But that's the whole thing about art, there's
like
not
you
a shelf.
Still have it as if you haven't gotten rid of it or sold it?
That I haven't sold it.
Still,
Yeah.
Because it was that good, or because they were like, oh.
They liked it. They liked it.
Right.
They liked it, and they were like, how do you still have that? And I mean, and I've seen pieces of my friends where I'm like, nobody's bought that yet? How come nobody's bought that? But at that particular show, the last time that happened, somebody came in and they fell in love with the piece. And
that's good.
So, I mean, it goes to show there's not a shelf life. I mean, with a piece of art, it has, you have to find your audience.
Right.
And in some pieces, it just takes that person to say, oh my gosh, I really relate to that, connect with it. For whatever reason, it might remind them of a childhood event or a place. That's what's so interesting when you do get to talk to people. And that was one thing I did like about the art fairs, because you did get to talk to people about the art and what drew them in and what they liked. When you're selling at a gallery, you don't always get that. I am in a gallery in Taos, and one of the things I like about the owner, and especially like about the owner, is she'll tell me like who bought the piece and where it's going
nice.
and what drew them in. And I feel like that kind of feedback's invaluable, really.
Yeah.
I mean, as an artist, you're still going to paint what speaks to you, but it's very gratifying and rewarding to hear that it speaks to somebody else.
At Bloom, somebody bought a picture of mine, and
Congratulations!
Thank you.
That's awesome.
But at first it was like very surreal because that's the first like piece somebody's bought. So to be validated as an artist, I was
Yes.
like, oh, that's interesting.
It is validating. It is.
But then I was like, oh my goodness, like somebody liked it. I want to be their best friend. Like, what made them like? And so, and I'm glad that the person does that for you.
Well, and you do kind of, it's interesting, you do kind of sometimes make that connection and become friends with the people that collect from you. I have several collectors that I consider friends, and they consider me a friend. And so that's always very gratifying too. But and sometimes, you said that word surreal. It is a little surreal. I did a show, one of the art fairs I did prior to 2020. I did the Rio Grande Art Fair in Albuquerque. And they asked me if they could use one of my pieces as a the promotion piece for the show.
Yeah.
So it was really a surreal. This was probably one of the most surreal things I've ever had.
Or your work, and then
yes.
like this is the title of the show.
And actually, it's funny. It was a small cactus piece, a 12 by 12 watercolor that I did my piece for Bloom this year. That was that won a
You
second
submitted
prize.
that piece?
No, it was a big piece I did based on that.
Oh, okay.
It was a big 36 by 36 acrylic piece, but it was based on a 12 by 12 watercolor piece I did some years ago. And because I always thought that really was a cool image and that deserved to be bigger. And sometimes you do decide that when you do smaller pieces. But at that show, it was so surreal because it was on the billboards around town. It was on a TV spot. Everybody's name tag had that image on it.
Oh my goodness. And did they all know, like when they approached you, they're like, oh, you're the artist who's...
Some people did. I mean, if I saw I had the piece in the show.
Right.
And in fact, the organizer of the show wanted to buy it, but that somebody bought it before that. So that was probably, when you said surreal, that was probably the most surreal thing. Oh, and they did posters, and I had to sign the posters.
You had to sign the posters?
Yes, it was so weird.
Oh my goodness. I'm talking to a celebrity. Oh my goodness.
What was interesting though was even though I had that kind of exposure at that show, it still wasn't like the best show I ever did. So people will say, and I talked to another artist after that, and they said, "Oh, you were the featured artist?" I said, "Yes," and they said, "Yeah, that's the kiss of death." So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's an artist superstition. Who knows? But it's
like once you get there, it's like down from here? What does that mean?
No, I really don't. I think he had been the featured artist, and then he didn't have like what he considered a successful show. So yeah, and it just goes back to, like I said, there's all these variable factors and that kind of thing. So I do prefer to do, and I love to do museum exhibitions. I've been in a couple of those now, and that's very exciting, to get to, because I feel like that's the next level up. And I was in a couple shows last year, and then in 2020, I did Cowgirl Up out in Wickenburg, which they host that show. It's an all women's Western show, and they have it at the I always get this name wrong. It's a very long name. Western Desert Caballeros Museum in Wickenburg, Arizona. And then I did the Coors Western show in Denver last year, and I'm doing that again this year. And that was very exciting because, I went to the show and my work was there with people that I really admire that are in that genre. And so that was very exciting.
Oh my goodness. And that was before or after the Kiss of Death?
Oh, much after.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
It's, you know what, it's a process. Being an artist is a process. It isn't like a straight uphill climb. There's a lot of hills and valleys, a lot of dips, and you really have to it's helpful. Let's say you don't have to. It's helpful to have the skin of a rhino, especially if you're going to do art fairs, because people say weird stuff to you all the time.
Right.
And not everybody's going to like your work, you know, or really kind of get it. And you learn that pretty quick. You know, there's the people that are going to love what you do. And then there's the people that really, you know, but I mean, it's good because then there's something for everybody.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of different
If
styles
all
out there.
landscape paintings were just realistic, I could just take a picture. But I like that there's other interpretations.
That's kind of what really was the turning point for me, because when I started out, I always tried to do everything very realistic. And it was frustrating because, you know, I have a certain skill level, and I think if I pushed it in that direction, I could be better at it. But it didn't really give me the joy that doing my own interpretation did.
Right.
And, you know, we would go to, and I, you know, I always thought I was going to paint, but I didn't start until really, really pretty late. I was about 50.
had seen on your website your quote that said better late than never.
Oh, and I live by that. And I tell people it's, you know, maybe I'm a late bloomer. I don't know. I think it was one of those things I had to give myself permission to just do it and try it. And I was making jewelry at the time.
Is that what you had done in your
I did that.
until
Well, it's
painting?
weird. I always worked. I mean, I was in retail. I did display. I worked in travel because I love to travel. And then when I had kids, when my husband and I had kids, we quickly realized that it would be maybe a lot easier if I could be home with them when they were young. So I wasn't home at the first years, but then I was home like one was 2 and one was 4. And on a total fluke, and I won't go into that story because it's pretty long, got into doing jewelry and realized that I could do that from home, be home, stay-at-home mom, do that and make pretty good money. And then I did do some shows. That was kind of my first experience with doing some shows and stuff. So like I was saying
and it was
earlier.
painting because what did you go to school for?
Well, I started out as an art major, and then I ended up changing to fashion merchandising because I was worried that I couldn't do anything with my art. I did have a drawing teacher my sophomore year who told me I should major in studio art with an emphasis on drawing. And my question to her was, because I was an oldest, I was the first one to go to college. My parents didn't go to college. They didn't really understand what it would be like to be an artist. I mean, and back in those days, the big term was starving artists. You know, there weren't all those opportunities that I think people know about today. You know, I mean, there's game design and illustration. Well, illustration was back in the day, but there's a lot of different avenues. And so my question to her was like, well, what would I do with that? You know, and she was like, well, you know, you could teach, which I couldn't picture myself teaching, and you could get fellowships and grants. And I just thought it didn't sound like something I would be able to sustain a living doing myself. And I think, you know, at that age, I really, you know, that just wasn't something I was going to do. I don't think I had the bravery and the confidence.
Was that fresh out of college or during college?
That was during college when she said that. And then, so when I graduated, and I had a degree in fashion merchandising, and I haven't really ever done anything with that. It didn't pay very well. And I went on a student trip to Europe, and I loved traveling. So that's when I decided to do travel. So I did travel, and then I would, you know, for a while there, I stopped and I did display. I did retail display. I worked for Crate and Barrel. And that was really kind of a fun job, but that didn't pay very well either. And then I did end up going to the Art Institute in Houston and did graphic design and worked at an ad agency for a really short time before we moved to Austin, and learned very quickly that what the kind of salary I could make doing, and I started out as like just a gopher and just an assistant to like the traffic manager at the ad agency. I wasn't even doing graphics. Made more money there than I could making as a graphic designer in Austin. So I kind of went back into the travel mode, and then and was a meeting planner for like 5 years. And I was really good at that. I had good attention to detail and stuff, but didn't love it. Needed something creative. And so I finally gravitated back to doing the jewelry making when my kids were small.
What kind of jewelry did you make?
I like vintage. I like vintage looking jewelry. So I was buying vintage beads and findings and making my own designs. And some of them weren't vintage looking necessarily, because I like to use turquoise and stones and different
Right.
things. But and I still have a lot of that inventory sitting in my studio. So maybe one
if
day
you ever
I'll
make some
do.
jewelry, I wouldn't mind buying some from them. That's
Well,
like completely my style. I
oh
love
really?
it. Mhm.
Oh, well, come over one day.
Like your necklace, I love your necklace, your rings.
Oh, well, I didn't
love it all.
make any of this, but
It's still pretty.
but yeah, no, I did really enjoy doing that, and I think it was working with color and texture and putting things together, and I love everything design, and I worked for an interior designer for 6 years too. I started doing that about the time I really had started getting back into painting, or not back into it, but back into doing art. In picking up painting as a medium, and I did a workshop where it was outside of my comfort zone. It was watercolor with abstracted shapes and representational.
You
But
taught the workshop, or you?
oh no,
you
I took it.
participated?
I took
Okay.
it from a man, Stephen Kilburn, he's a potter and a painter in Taos, and that was a turning point for me because I went into it with a very open mind and thought, I'm going to get whatever I can get out of this. I want to
Right.
loosen my style. I don't want to be super realistic. I, wanted to see what I can do when it's more of my interpretation, because that was the kind of work I liked.
Right.
We'd go to New Mexico and I'd see like all the Taos School of Painters. Their work was, you could tell what it was. I mean, it was very representational, but it was definitely their interpretation. And that's what really appealed to me. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Looking back at the art fairs, so in Plein Air, what I noticed is the prices are fairly high. So how do you go about pricing your art? And then in art fairs, is it priced the same, or
It
is
should
it
be.
for like
Your
foot traffic?
pricing should be, I tell other artists this all the time when they ask me,
Consistency.
it needs to be consistent, because if people are buying from you, they don't want to buy a piece and then see something similar for a much lower price. They're going to
Right.
feel like they were, cheated or
Right.
whatever. But no, it needs to be consistent. It is kind of hard starting out to know where to start. And in fact, when I did that workshop, they had a little reception at the end of the show where he had a studio and gallery in town, and we were able to frame a piece and then have it on display, and he had like a little reception. And I remember his wife, she ran that gallery, and I said, I don't know what to price this at. And she said, well, this is really good. I would price this at $350.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like an 11 by 14 or whatever it was. And here I am in this workshop with other people who have been painting much longer than
Right.
me, and they were all pricing their stuff really low. And so I kind of thought, well, okay, because it was the first time I had been really painting in this style. And I thought, well, you know what? If it doesn't sell, I kind of want to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay. But I did learn early on, and I learned this from doing the jewelry, like having a low price point wasn't necessarily always a good thing, because there's a perception that when a price is low, something isn't good.
Right.
So there is a whole psychology to pricing. And, the general rule of thumb right now is, you should be increasing your price by 10% every year if you can. If, it kind of depends on what's happening in the world with the
Right.
economy. And
But also your audience. If your audience who you are going to sell your art to can afford that 10% increase, then might as well.
and I've kind of upped my game. My husband's doing my framing, and his frames really are a good value.
I was going to ask about that. So has he always done framings, or
No,
does
he
is it
just
artist and then
it'll be 2 years in December that he started learning how to do them, and he has clients, artists in Santa Fe and all
did
over
he start
now.
making them specifically for your art?
For me.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Which now he's got all these other accounts. I'm like, okay, don't forget, I need work too.
You're like, mine first, and then theirs.
Yeah. So, and he actually, of course, because he's my husband, I get a better rate on my frame. So when people buy my work, even though I've increased it a little bit over the last couple of years, they're still getting a really good value as far as the frame, because, the same frame for somebody else is going to cost a little
Right.
more. And the other artists, they may or may not know that, but I help him do several things. So I'm like, okay.
You're like, I deserve the discount. and
Yes.
so-
But yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see what other questions we have. We kind of covered a lot of stuff.
Yes, we have.
Do you want to check the time to see if you need to
Yes. let
get
me
to
just-
your meeting anytime?
Oh, I have a little bit of time left.
Oh, okay, awesome. Let's see. Oh, tell us about how you got accepted into EnPleinAir.
Well, I was kind of surprised and shocked and very pleased, obviously. I remember, so what you do when you apply to a show like on Plein Air, Texas, and with any show really, it's a juried process. And for on Plein Air, Texas, they have one juror. And so I think a lot of times, I have juried a show, and I've learned that looking at art, it's subjective, and you can't help but pick what you like.
Right.
So you always hope that the juror in question is going to like what you do.
Is there usually a panel to kind of keep it
Some
fair?
shows have a panel or a selection committee. Some just have one art curator that makes the selections, or one juror, or maybe it's a panel of 3. It really varies.
Mm-hmm.
It really varies from show to show. But for On Plein Air, Texas, they have one that chooses.
That's so scary.
It is a little scary, and you get to select 3 pieces. So it's always, kind of a crapshoot. It's like, what do I pick, for my pieces? And so you pick what you think is your best. And I've talked to some of the judges at EPAT here in the last couple of years, and it's funny because they'll tell me, oh, they should have put this piece in the competition because they would have won a prize. So what we as the artists think might be our best piece may not be what a judge or a juror thinks is the best piece.
And did you say that you've juried shows?
I did just one event. I juried, I was asked to jury the Wimberley Art League, invited me to come and jury their show, one of their group shows. And I didn't know they were going to ask me to also judge it right then and there too. So I was a little bit like, oh, okay, so now I get to judge it. Because jurying, it was hard enough.
So you pick all the pieces that go in the show and then pick which ones get prizes?
And it was hard because, there were some really equally good pieces. Right. So then that, I think, what comes into play is kind of like what you personally like best.
I mean, yeah, so I was going to ask that too. So aside from your personal likings, do you also look for composition, color, things like the basics?
Composition, color, the execution, presentation, subject matter, just overall appeal, because if something was in there and it wasn't presented very well, that would be a count against it, in my opinion, because really you're looking at the whole package. Right. And that's why I feel like the framing is important. So incorporating the framing of is it on theme or does it fit the aesthetic of this painting? Yes, because a bad frame can make your painting look really bad. Oh my goodness. And I will admit, I've gotten very critical of that because I recently... You're around frames all the time. Yeah, I'm around frames. And also, just design-wise and everything. So recently I was looking at Instagram and I saw a painter I know was at a show, and I'm not going to say he or she, I'm just going to say they posted pictures of their setup, and they had too many paintings in the space. And I'm kind of say this to other artists, like if you're doing some, you want to be careful about not overwhelming, because somebody could walk in and because you have too many things to choose from, it might be hard for them to make a selection. And I've been guilty of that too. Paintings, there's no sculptures to break it up in between. So well, this was at an art fair, and that was paintings. What they had. Yeah. And so everything was framed very differently, so it looked really hodgepodge, and there was no cohesiveness. And so, I think as a juror, I would be looking that. And I know as a judge, maybe too. I mean, you kind of want paintings that are going to fit the frame to fit the painting, obviously. And sometimes, and I mean, when I did EPAT, I didn't have all the same frames. I had some different frames, but they fit the painting itself. Yes, but tried to group it. And this year when I do it, I'll probably. I don't know that my husband's going to have time to do all my frames for that. So we'll see what happens. But I'll probably... I know that last year they had a cellar of frames. Yes. Pat from JFM comes and he really brings some nice frames. And there were so many. That's really what most of I still have a few I bought from him last year. So, you just try to make it look the best that you can. But back to the juror, the process, you submit 3 pieces and hope that they're going to see what they like for the show and that they'll speak to them. And I tried to pick 3 pieces that had different subject matter. I think I had one that was a pure landscape. I had one that had a structure in the landscape. and I think I might have had two just landscapes. But I did throw a structure in there because, when you paint here, a lot of times, you could be painting a structure. I have my eye on a couple things here in town that I want to paint.
And the structure, is that just the building, like the focal points?
Yeah, a building or a church or, something of that nature, or a barn, that kind of thing. And people do kind of like that. And I do like to put those into my landscape. I don't always just do just plain landscape. I like to use vegetation, like a tree or a cactus or, something to kind of break it up sometimes.
When
or be
painting
focal.
the still, like nature, it doesn't move as much. So whenever you're painting things that move, how do you go about how much detail to put in and what to leave out?
Well, I'll tell you what moves is the light.
Oh, right.
So painting plein air really is chasing the light. Because the light changes, it changes rapidly, and that's really what plein air painters are trying to get is that light, because the shadows change. That's why you really want to try to paint fast and get that first impression down. And I can paint pretty fast when needed. In fact, it's interesting to me too, the paintings I painted really quickly. I was at a plein air event in Marble Falls, and those were the two to sell. And I was surprised because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just did those, and it was just, kind of a flow. And I don't know that I would say, in my opinion, that those were the best paintings I ever did. But, I think there was a spontaneity and a freshness that was appealing because, they weren't overworked. And, I didn't go back to them 20 times and, oh, what's wrong with this, and tweak it, which is always, that's something that all of us artists fight against is the overworking.
Can there ever just be too much detail to where it's like, oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was working on a really big piece for the show, and I didn't feel there was something about it. I'm like, oh, I really love this area. But then I was like, but it fights with another part of the painting.
Right.
And I just didn't really love it. And so even though I really felt like I didn't have the time to go back to it, I made the time and I said, okay, I need to be happy with this. And this is not making me happy. And I have a little app called Brushes. This is really a handy app where you can put your a photo of your drawing or your painting in, and then you can go over it. Like you can see like, okay, what if I painted over this with this?
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah, so you don't have to go in and do it on the painting. I mean, I've done that where I've painted on a separate piece of paper and laid it over just to see, before I would make a change, like, do I like this? And I realized after I did that, I'm like, oh no, even though I love this area, this has to be painted over. So I went in and I painted over it, and then I was much happier with the piece.
That's good.
So sometimes you do have to do that. But so no, when they announced when I got into EPAT in 2020, they did it. I was watching online. They did the envelope.
Yes, how was EPAT during COVID?
They did the announcement online. They did a video of it might have been like even a Zoom where they had. It was Sarah Linda Polly was the juror that year.
I thought you were going to say Sarah Paulson for some reason.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
Sarah Linda Polly was the juror that year, and so she went through all of them and would announce who it was and show a picture of you and then your painting. And I remember I was sitting there. My son was living with us at the time, and me and my son and my husband were all watching, and we all got up and danced around, and it was very exciting.
That's so sweet.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
And then you got to bust out all those paintings and go to the event. And that was here at the museum?
No, we actually, that year, they set it up at the stables. I think that was their first year to do it at the stables, and it was really an ideal space to do it there because there was plenty of room and, with social distancing and all of that. Excuse me, it was really helpful.
Pillars to kind of divide the space.
So I think that's probably where they'll do it every year from now on.
Okay.
I would imagine because it
was. Because they were there last year too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what I was thinking of then. I know that we had the event in the back where like the dancers came. I remember they painted the dancers, or they like.
Oh, that was our quick draw.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the quick draw.
That was super cool.
Well, maybe some of them came and did like demo painting. There might have been a couple that posed for demos, which I did not do that year because I was intimidated, but maybe I would be brave and do it. I don't usually paint people, and that was one of the paintings that sold so quickly at that event that I did. I decided to challenge myself and
You painted a person?
I painted. We had the musician W.C. Clark came and played for the artists when we were at this. What was the name of that place? The Joint in Spicewood. And it was a fun place to paint because they had all of these funky kind of little installations all over the property. And I think they would have music at this venue from time to time. So they got W.C. Clark to come and play for us, and that was really fun. And I had finished up a small painting, and I thought, okay, I still have some time. What am I going to paint next? And I saw all these other artists I know painting him, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. So I got all set up and started my painting. Then he said, oh, I'm going to take a break. And so he went and he took a break. And when he came back, he said, well, I remembered I have to be somewhere. So I'm going to sit here for 15 more minutes. It might have been 20. It was really a short time frame. And so I madly was painting him. And I don't really paint people. Like I did do a figure in the landscape a couple years ago, and but I haven't really been practicing that since then. So I had to kind of remember, like, oh, how did I do this? You know, the proportions and and the skin tone, and he happened to be a black man, and I'd never painted a black person before, so I was really scrambling. Just it was very intuitive, just doing it quickly. Like, okay, that looks good, and then just doing it. And so I think there might have been an energy and a spontaneity to that piece. And so painting quickly isn't always a bad thing,
right?
But,
I do often, whenever they are painted quickly. And then we had the artists, whenever we were titling or we put stickers on their pieces, and they're like, the paint's still wet. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's first of all intimidating, very scary. I was terrified to hold their painting, but like you could see the energy in that painting because it was done like only
well, and
ago.
then and when those are done really well, like you'll see here, I mean, that to me is just so impressive because you have to be pretty decisive. One of there's a couple, there's many artists that are very decisive in the group, but Carla Bosch, she paints in acrylic, and I really admire what she does because, she's very decisive with her marks, and she has that energy to the pieces and, completes it and has this finished piece in a short window of time. And it takes a lot of time, many years of painting, I think, to get to that point. I mean, there's probably some people out there, there's a couple of younger plein air painters that I'm like, wow, because, for them to get that quickly is very impressive. And then Christine Lashley, oh my gosh, her quick draw last year, I was like, if I was in the studio doing that same thing, it would take me, a long time to do. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm very in awe of some of most of them, what they do, and I aspire to to that level someday. I don't know.
No, but your work's good. You have your own style.
I do have my own style, which probably.
And do you quick draw on your style?
Oh yeah, I do. I did and I did challenge myself last year. I had a little bit of a mishap because I tried to. I was going to do it on black gesso and did it on site, and the black gesso, when it's cold, it was cold that morning. Didn't want to dry, and I had to go find. I had some stuff in the car, and I had to go find something that was already gessoed. Didn't fit the frame that I brought, so I had to put my piece up without a frame, which is not really what you're supposed to do, but that's all I could do. And I chose to paint the dancers. So I was trying to use what I learned in my workshop about proportion, and I chose just to do 2 of the 3, and because I edit all the time. I do know some artists that they paint from photos, and I'm like, don't be slavish to the photo.
Right.
What makes it interesting is your interpretation, and what you decide to include and not include.
So like photos are okay, but don't just replicate the photo onto a canvas.
Yeah, I don't think that makes for a good painting,
Right.
and maybe that's just my opinion, but I really don't feel like it. I think it just kind of takes all the life out of it. So it was a good experience doing that. I didn't win any prizes, of course, and that was. I do have to just say I had a really exciting experience at EPAT that first year I did it, because I was with the competition artist, and in the quick draw, I won one of the judges' choice awards.
Oh, nice!
And that was super exciting. But I think even more exciting than winning an award, which that was like my first big award I've ever won.
Right.
So that was really exciting. The judge, Tim Newton, had said that that my piece reminded me of a piece of art by Howard Post, who's an artist who I really admire.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was kind of an extra.
Did he know that you admired Howard Post?
Oh, no. It turns out he's a friend of his. And I was like, oh my God. And I told him that. I told him, I said, boy, that compliment meant as much or even more than winning the award.
Right.
So that was pretty cool. That was very cool.
Goodness.
But yeah, no, I didn't win any awards last year. I didn't. My piece was, I did end up going home and working on it a little bit more. And then And
that one was the dancers?
It was the dancers. And, and I was at the West Austin studio tour, and I had that piece there. And the designer I used to work for, her assistant, they came to the show, and her assistant ended up buying it.
That's awesome.
So I was excited about that it spoke to somebody. Because I did like how it turned out. It had a nice energy to it.
They had you're talking about the one from last year, right?
Mm-hmm,
yeah, they had wonderful colors. Like the dancers were wearing beautiful
that
dresses.
Was a great. And this year we're going to be doing the quick draw at the chicken farm, which I am super excited about. I love the chicken farm.
Are you guys going to paint the workers or like the artists?
Well,
the
I think they're going to have probably the pickers there. So I think there will be musicians to paint.
That's
I don't know that I will try that this year, but there's plenty of other really good stuff to paint
so much
there.
Like detail. Oh, speaking of detail, so whenever you paint something really close up, is that still considered in plein air? If it's outside, like is there a different term for it?
No, if it's painted outdoors and it's from life, it would be considered plein air.
Just like a zoomed in version of plein air.
Well, and that's what's interesting, because some people will choose to paint an element. One of the best paintings I saw that year I participated, one of the artists, instead of painting the whole building, chose to paint a window in the building, and it was very effective. And Matt Barber Kennedy he does that a lot, where he'll paint an element. And that can be just as interesting as a full-blown landscape.
Right. That's awesome.
I mean, you could paint. What was the example my friends like to use? They said they were at, I think it was before I moved here, they were at a plein air quick draw, and somebody painted a trash can. And they said it was a fabulous painting. They said, it goes to show it isn't necessarily what you paint, it's how you paint it. So, you can choose to do kind of an offbeat subject. And I know when we were at the joint at Spicewood, I don't know that anybody will ever buy this painting, but I kind of loved it. There was a little weird installation somebody had made, like a little. It was two sinks, and it was sitting in a fountain, and it was just kind of funky, and I liked the colors.
Two like faucet sinks?
Like pedestal sinks. One was pink, and I think one was white, and I chose to paint that, and I think I titled it All Washed Up or Wash Up or something like that. Is
there a picture of that anyway that I could like pop up?
Do I have a photo? I don't know if I have a photo. I'll look and see. Okay. It's actually, I have some work at it's sort of a gallery boutique shop in San Antonio called Mockingbird Handprints.
I was just there.
Oh, you were?
I would have known.
Shoot.
Next time. I go there all the time. I'll check it out.
My son just moved there.
Oh, right. You told me about that.
We love San Antonio.
I love San Antonio.
San Antonio is, if I was going to move to a big city in Texas, I probably would choose, a big city.
Yeah.
I'd probably choose San Antonio. I feel like it's got a good energy and a lot of art. They're very into the arts there.
Yeah.
The best art fair I've ever done was in San Antonio.
That's awesome.
I felt like that was my audience.
I have a lot of family over there, and so it just feels like a second home. And then if I had to choose after that, I would choose Austin, but it's too crazy expensive. Drivers are insane. I'd like, I don't know, there's something really Texas about San Antonio to where I don't feel like, I mean, Houston and Dallas and Austin, they're like huge cities, so you kind of feel like you're not in Texas, but San Antonio, that's Texas.
I think their tagline is you feel like you're, I think that's a good sister city for San Angelo, actually.
It is.
You know?
I literally feel like it's just a really, really big San Angelo.
Yes, in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were we saying about Mockingbird handprint.
Yes.
So she has, I tend to send her some of my more what I consider funky pieces because she gets a different kind of a clientele there. And her shop's interesting. She has a lot of eclectic art and she hand dyes fabrics and puts them on as upholstery.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I definitely recommend that as a fun place to go if you're in San Antonio.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to going there and going to some of the museums and checking them out.
Have you been to Ruby City?
No. What's Ruby City?
It's just one of the museums they have there. I'm pretty sure it's contemporary art. I'll have to fact check that.
Yeah.
But I really liked the exhibit they had recently. I'll talk about that another time, getting off track. But I liked it. You should check it out.
Well, I can't wait till the roof is done on the museum and it's back in operation.
So many plans. I am so excited.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting.
There's going to be like a gala. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know if that's a secret.
Is that for the grand reopening?
Yes.
Yes.
But there's just going to be a lot of events for the grand opening that I'm looking forward to. Either working at so I can attend or just blown out attending.
Well, one of the things, I think it's okay to talk about it, was the 5x7 show that they plan.
Oh, right.
It's I had talked to Alex about it, and they used to have one of those in Austin, and I did it a couple times, and it's so fun.
And so how
everybody
big is
does
5x7?
Just a 5" by 7" 5x7" and everybody does one, and they display them. And I don't know if they will do it the same way that they did it in Austin.
How many do you usually display that? Because it's super tiny. So is it just big gallery and then tiny art, or is it like a bunch of tiny art everywhere?
A bunch. It's a fundraiser.
Oh,
so
awesome!
I think probably I'm guessing that they will take anybody's 5x7 art. I don't know that for certain, but I would encourage any artist out there to do it because it's just fun. It's for a good cause.
You get to have your work in the museum.
You get to have your work seen, and you never know where that might lead. Sometimes having a small work is a good. The gallery I'm at in Buda, outside of Austin, they are for their anniversary party are doing a 6x6" small work show, and I have 2 pieces in that. One is 6" 6x6, but I was a little low on work, so I'm including an 8x8 that I did as a plein air piece in Big Bend.
In Big Bend
of the mule ears.
nice.
So that'll be fun. But yeah, for the fundraiser, that I'm really excited about that because I think that'll be a fun thing to attend, fun thing to participate in.
Right. I don't think. I don't know if I would want to submit anything. I'm not good at really painting. But like I could.
You could submit. You could submit.
That'd be fun.
It would be. I would encourage everybody to submit.
Consider it. Yeah.
I'll be talking to. So we've got the PASA group here in San Angelo, Plein Air Painters of San Angelo, and I'll be definitely trying to encourage everybody to participate.
Oh, that'd be cool work.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of miniature and plein airs.
Yes,
that's adorable. This is rounding out to my end of the conversation. Last questions. How do you go about titling a piece if it's a
sometimes I have the title before I start the piece. I know what I'm going to call it, and I always like that. I always prefer that because I feel like it helps with the direction that the piece takes. But I don't always have a title when I start. And then sometimes it's hard. And I know that it's not just me because I'll see on Instagram or Facebook, somebody will post something and they'll say, any suggestions for a title? And I'm like, and I usually will chime in because sometimes, when you're objective, you see something that you're like, oh yeah, that would be perfect title for that. But yeah, I have a couple pieces for my show I'm working on. I have not titled yet. And then sometimes you go to bed and you wake up in the morning and you like, bingo. I had a piece I was doing for a show and I did not know what I was going to call it. And I woke up and the title was in my head.
But you already had the piece painted or was it like you had the title and then?
No, I had that piece was painted and I was like, it was for this show that I did that was really, you talk about outside the comfort zone or not something I usually do. It was called In the Anthropocene, and it was about the environment after the event of the atomic age, which is very relevant right now with the movie Oppenheimer out and everything.
Right.
And in fact, the one painting, I'm like, I maybe should post that again because anybody that goes to see Oppenheimer, this might resonate with them.
You advertise it,
Because
yeah.
it's actually a bomb exploding.
Post that, yeah.
And I did that because I needed something that tied in with the show. And I was trying to find something that kind of was in my wheelhouse. And I like to paint clouds and do them kind of different and funky. And I thought, well, I can paint that. And what was interesting with that painting was my husband and my son both pointed out after I did it, it almost looks like a tree and then goes into this mushroom cloud.
Cool.
And the painting has a lot of energy.
Is it more of a darker blacks and then the reds are
the
like a bomb?
outside of it is kind of dark, and then like the inside, it's orange and yellow. And I'll post it. I'll do an Instagram post,
and then we'll post it,
and so you can see it. And then the other one, because it was about the environment. It was hurricane season, I think, when I was painting it. So that was sort of in my head. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to see a hurricane from above, just like the shape of it. I always think the shape of it's interesting, how it, the energy that starts up that ends up very devastating as it hits landfall. And so I did that one, and that one was really hard to photograph. That one's much better in person. But those two pieces are at her gallery right now. And after the show was over, I had gotten them back. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the show because I was so busy during that whole time frame. It was just a crazy fall. But oddly enough, the painting kind of looks a little bit like, it kind of reminds me of a Georgia O'Keeffe painting for some reason. Almost kind of like a flower. It's a strange little piece. I'll personally send you that in person so you can see what that looks like, so you can see what I'm talking about. So sometimes the paintings take on a life of their own, but that was, I think it's good to stretch yourself from time to time and try something that's different. I have ideas, things I want to do that I'm kind of waiting to have time to do them. And, it's a good thing, but sometimes it's a bad thing. But I've been real busy with other things that have all been good. But, as an artist, I do think it's very important to experiment and try some different things. So I'm kind of hoping maybe I'll have some time this winter to do that.
Do you think with experimenting, your style would ever evolve, or is your style always evolving?
I think it should always evolve. I want to continue to grow as an artist and not get locked into thinking every piece has to look like this, because I think in the long term, that's limiting to me as an artist. And, and I want to try some different mediums. I want to try pastel, and I've done some printmaking, and I love printmaking. And because I come from a background of drawing. That was really what I did as an artist early on. That was my thing. So in printmaking is drawing. I mean, you could do a monotype, which is a painting on glass, and then make a print of it. But I really want to do, and really drawing, the more you can improve your drawing, the more it improves your painting. So it all ties together. It's kind of what I would call creative cross-training. So yes, I would kind of see myself evolving some, and hopefully getting better, That's always the goal. You get to a point and you feel like, okay, and this was something I saw recently posted, and I totally got what they were saying and agreed with it. You start out and you're not very good, and then you work at it and you become better. Then you work at it some more, and you might become good, and then you work at it some more, and you get, so it's just a constant. And the more you paint, the more critical you get of your work.
Right. And you're your worst critic.
You know that it could be better, and of course, you can only do the best you can. And then it's that time at the easel. You've got to spend time at the easel to try to get to that next level.
When painting in the studio, or whenever you're out for the Plein Air events, do you listen to music, or is it usually like calm? Or
I usually used to listen to nothing. And then recently my husband said, here's a speaker. And I've been listening to music. And sometimes I'll listen to music, but I kind of like I like classical. But then I've also recently been listening to the Turnpike Troubadours. I've got Spotify, and it's very upbeat, and I've been listening to their channel or whatever, and different artists that are on that. And I feel like it's maybe helped my painting a little. So I'm like,
Nice.
okay, I'm going to do this more.
So, like, what you listen to can influence your work? And
I think so. Yeah.
nice.
I think it
So,
can.
For closing statements, do you have any advice for anyone in general or young artists? Or?
I would say just, if find something you like, but don't be afraid to experiment and try different things because, I really didn't find my voice, my style as a painter. And people ask me that all the time, that question, until I did that workshop and just let myself be very open to what he was trying to show us is simplify. Maybe that would be my message. Simplify, simplify, simplify.
Awesome.
And practice, practice, practice,
And where can we find your work? Website, socials?
I do have a website, which is debbiecarrollfineart.com. I'm in quite a few galleries right now.
I know you were naming them off, so if you can count them on your hands or something.
Assemblage Contemporary Craftsman Gallery in Buda, Texas, and they have a website. Don't ask me to spell that one out. The Ranch at Taos in Taos, New Mexico. It's right there on Kit Carson Road. It's a small gallery, but she's got some great stuff in there, and so does Assemblage. They all do. And then in Scottsdale and Tucson, I'm in the Wildmeyer Gallery. I've been there for a few years. Recently went into the Mary Williams Fine Art Gallery in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I'm pretty new to that gallery. I've only been in there for a couple months, so
Nice.
That's new. And then
your work is spread everywhere.
I'm trying to get representation,
Yeah.
in the whole Southwest corridor, and I think that's been very helpful, And then just being in some of the shows and social media. That's another, it's another platform where you can share your work.
Right.
I think sharing your work is, very important.
And so everyone sees it. I mean,
Yeah, and I would say, not to be afraid to put yourself out there, although it can be kind of scary,
Right.
and but you got to do that. You got to do that if you want people to see it. That's a way to be seen and kind of get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today and for talking with us.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. It's been very enjoyable, and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay.